There is something deeply dangerous happening in this generation. Many people want the crown, but very few are willing to endure the crushing that prepares a person to carry it. People are obsessed with elevation, but they resist the hidden seasons of preparation. They want influence without discipline, authority without obedience, recognition without sacrifice. They want destiny handed to them instantly, without understanding that every God-given destiny must pass through a process. This generation has become addicted to visibility. Everyone wants to be seen. Everyone wants quick success, quick blessings, quick fame, quick spiritual titles, quick results. But spiritually, God has never operated through shortcuts. In the kingdom of God, there is always a wilderness before the promised land. There is always pruning before fruitfulness. There is always preparation before promotion. Because God understands something many people ignore. A crown placed on an unprepared mind becomes destruction instead of blessing. That is why spiritually, God is more concerned about your foundation than your popularity. Because what rises too quickly without depth often collapses under pressure. Before David became king, he was a forgotten shepherd in isolation, while others were being celebrated publicly. David was fighting lions and bears privately. Nobody applauded him in the wilderness. Nobody reposted his obedience. Nobody noticed his hidden faithfulness. But those hidden battles were preparing him for visible responsibility. Before Joseph stood in the palace, he first suffered betrayal, rejection, slavery, false accusation, and prison. God gave him the dream early, but allowed the process to shape his character before the fulfillment arrived. Because a man without spiritual maturity could never survive the level of power Joseph was about to carry. Before Moses led a nation, he spent years in the wilderness being humbled. Before Esther wore a crown, she went through preparation. Before Paul preached boldly, he was broken deeply. And before Jesus was glorified, he carried a cross. He experienced rejection, mockery, pain, isolation, suffering. Because spiritually, sacrifice often comes before elevation. Yet many people today become frustrated with God, not because God abandoned them, but because they are trying to skip the craft and jump straight to the crown. They want the reward without the refinement. They want the anointing without the surrender. They want spiritual authority without private intimacy with God. But heaven does not release crowns carelessly. God will never give you something your character cannot sustain. And psychologically, this is where many people silently struggle. We live in a world that constantly pressures people to compare themselves with others. Social media has created a generation that sees everybody's highlight moments, but nobody's hidden battles. So people begin to feel behind in life. They see someone succeeding, and suddenly they feel forgotten. They see someone growing, and suddenly they doubt their own journey. But what many fail to understand is this: visible success often hides invisible suffering. Every strong person has a hidden story, a hidden battle, a hidden season where they cried, doubted, struggled, prayed, and kept going anyway. The crown people admire is usually built on years of unseen consistency. And this message is for those who are exhausted from rushing, tired of comparing, tired of pretending to be strong, tired of feeling like they must arrive quickly, tired of chasing greatness while secretly feeling empty inside. This is for the person who feels discouraged because life is taking longer than expected, for the person questioning why God has not opened the door yet, for the person who feels unnoticed while others seem to move ahead. Spiritually, your hidden season is not evidence that God forgot you. It may actually be evidence that God is carefully building you. Because the truth is, the crown is not the first thing God gives. The process is. And sometimes the process feels uncomfortable because it confronts your pride. It exposes your weakness. It stretches your patience. It kills your ego. It teaches endurance. The process teaches you how to stay humble when success finally comes. Because if God gave some people the crown too early, their ego would destroy them. So God uses the process to purify motives, to strengthen character, to deepen faith, to build spiritual maturity, and many people call this season delay, but heaven calls it preparation. Because God is not only trying to bless your future, He is trying to prepare your soul to survive it. And this is where many people misunderstand God. Because after praying for greatness, they become frustrated when heaven responds with process instead of promotion. They ask God for elevation, but God gives them hidden seasons. They ask for influence, but God gives them discipline. They ask for purpose, but God gives them preparation. And spiritually, this is the part many people try to escape. Because the craft is uncomfortable. The craft is the hidden place where God begins to work on the parts of you nobody else can see. Most people celebrate public success, but heaven studies private obedience. Humans are impressed by platforms. God is impressed by faithfulness. People look at the crown. God looks at the character carrying it. And the truth is, the craft is the hidden season. It is the season where nobody claps for you. Nobody notices your effort. Nobody reposts your sacrifices. Nobody celebrates your consistency. It is the lonely season, the season where you keep praying, even when nothing seems to change. The season where you keep trying, even when nobody believes in you. The season where you keep building quietly while others appear to move ahead faster than you. And psychologically, this hidden season can feel painful because human beings naturally desire recognition. We want reassurance that our effort matters. We want visible proof that we are progressing. But God often allows hidden seasons because hidden roots create lasting trees. A tree that grows without deep roots cannot survive storms. And many people today are spiritually collapsing under pressure because they pursued visibility before developing depth. They mastered appearance, but never mastered character. They learned how to impress people, but never learned how to endure hardship. And this is why the craft matters. Because spiritually, the craft is where God builds foundations, not platforms. Foundations. The craft is where God teaches patience, teaches endurance, teaches humility, teaches emotional control, teaches surrender. Because many people want visible glory while ignoring invisible growth. They want the stage, but not the stretching. They want applause, but not accountability. They want spiritual authority, but they avoid spiritual discipline. But what people call delay, God often calls development. What feels slow to you may actually be sacred preparation, because God sees dangers ahead that you cannot yet see. God understands that a weak character cannot sustain heavy responsibility. That is why He sometimes slows people down before lifting them up. Because if your character is weak, your crown will eventually destroy you. A platform without wisdom becomes pride. Influence without humility becomes manipulation. Power without self-control becomes corruption. This is why some people receive success and suddenly lose themselves. The very thing they prayed for becomes the thing that breaks them, not because the blessing was evil, but because their inner life was not prepared for the weight of it. Some people are praying for influence, but they cannot even control their emotions. A small disagreement ruins their peace. A little criticism destroys their confidence. A minor delay makes them lose faith. And spiritually, God understands something powerful. If small pressure already controls you, greater responsibility may crush you. Some people want leadership, but they have not learned humility. They want to lead crowds, but cannot serve quietly. They want to be heard, but refuse correction. They want honor, but reject accountability. Yet throughout Scripture, God always trained people in hiddenness before exposing them publicly. David learned worship in isolation before he led a nation. Joseph learned endurance in prison before entering the palace. Moses learned humility in the wilderness before carrying responsibility for Israel. Even Jesus spent years in preparation before stepping fully into ministry. Because heaven never rushes maturity. And some people want spiritual power, but they lack spiritual discipline. They want anointing without prayer, authority without surrender, wisdom without obedience. But spiritually, real power is built in secret places. The private place creates the public strength. What you repeatedly do in private eventually shapes who you become in public. And this is why God is not preparing the blessing alone. He is preparing you for the blessing. He is strengthening your mind, purifying your motives, healing your pride, building your endurance, teaching you dependence on Him, and psychologically, this is where many people break, because the human mind naturally craves quick reward. We want result now, recognition now, success now, answers now. This generation has become deeply uncomfortable with slow growth. Everything around us promotes speed, fast money, fast fame, fast relationships, fast success. But spiritual maturity cannot be microwaved. Deep people are not built overnight. Strong faith is not created in comfort. Wisdom is usually born through process, pain, patience, and persistence. And many people quit because they mistake slow progress for failure. But spiritually, slow growth is still growth. A seed buried in the ground may look forgotten, but underground, roots are forming. And roots matter more than visibility, because what grows upward without growing downward eventually collapses. The seed does not become a tree overnight. It survives darkness first, pressure first, burial first, and neither do you. You are not weak because your process is taking time. You are being built. Every hidden battle, every delayed season, every silent prayer, every moment of obedience is shaping you into someone strong enough to carry what you once prayed for. Because spiritually, the craft is not punishment, it is preparation for the crown. 30 years hidden, 3 years revealed. God is not in a hurry like humans are. Spiritually, every person has a divine timing, and psychologically, comparison creates anxiety because it makes you measure your life against moments that were never assigned to you. And this is where the battle becomes very subtle, because one of the biggest spiritual killers in this generation is comparison. It doesn't always come loudly. It doesn't always look like sin on the surface. Sometimes it feels like motivation. Sometimes it feels like I'm just observing. Sometimes it feels like I'm trying to improve myself. But deep inside, comparison slowly begins to poison gratitude. It makes people disrespect their own journey without even realizing it. Because the moment you start measuring your life against someone else's progress, you stop seeing your own growth clearly. You begin to feel delayed, even when you are actually developing. You look at someone succeeding, and suddenly your peace starts to leave you. You see someone getting married, and you start questioning your worth. You see someone building wealth, and you begin to feel like your efforts are meaningless. You see someone growing spiritually, becoming influential, achieving milestones, and silently your soul begins to panic, not because you are failing, but because you are comparing seasons that are not the same. And spiritually, this is where many people lose clarity. Because what you are seeing is not their full story. You are seeing their crown, but you are not seeing their craft. You are seeing the result, but not the process. You are seeing the public testimony, but not the private tears. And this is why comparison is dangerous. Because it is based on incomplete information. You do not know their hidden battles, their silent sacrifices, their sleepless nights, their moments of doubt when nobody was around to encourage them, their private struggles with fear, insecurity, rejection, or pressure, their discipline when nobody was watching, their obedience when it was inconvenient. People often admire the reward, while completely ignoring the process that produced it. And spiritually, this is a deception many fall into, because every crown you admire today was once carried through pain, patience, and process. Even Jesus himself walked this truth. Before public ministry, before miracles, crowds, and recognition, he spent 30 years in preparation for only 3 years of visible ministry. Think about that deeply. 30 years of hidden formation, 30 years of ordinary life, 30 years of preparation, and only a short season of public assignment. This reveals something powerful about God's system. God is not in a hurry like humans are. He is not impressed by speed. He is committed to depth, because speed without maturity leads to destruction. And spiritually, every person has a divine timing, a season that is uniquely designed for their growth, a process that is uniquely tailored for their assignment, a journey that cannot be copied, rushed, or compared. This is why no two destinies unfold the same way. And psychologically, comparison becomes destructive because it creates false timelines in your mind. It makes you believe you are late, when in reality, you are just in a different stage of development. It makes you feel behind. When you are actually being built, it makes you anxious, because you are trying to measure your life using someone else's assignment. But what God is building in you cannot be rushed, because what is deeply rooted takes time. What is strong takes seasons. What is lasting requires process. And your process is not punishment. It is preparation, even when it feels slow, even when it feels invisible, even when it feels like nothing is happening. God is still working. And this is where spiritual maturity begins, when you stop interpreting delay as rejection and start understanding it as divine alignment. Because while you are busy comparing your life to others, God is busy shaping something in you that comparison can never see. And that is why your story is still unfolding exactly as it should. And this is where the message becomes even more serious. Because after understanding seasons and comparison, the next hidden danger is intention. Many people are not just chasing success, they are chasing identity through success. Some people do not actually want the crown to serve God. They want the crown to serve their ego. They want visibility without responsibility. They want admiration without accountability. They want influence without inner transformation. They want attention, validation, power, control, recognition. And spiritually, this is a dangerous foundation to build a life upon. Because anything God gives that is carried by pride will eventually collapse under its own weight. God does not just give blessings based on desire. He weighs intention. He looks beyond what you are asking for and examines why you are asking for it. Because two people can pray the same prayer, but heaven responds differently depending on the heart behind it. One person wants the crown to serve people and glorify God. Another wants the crown to elevate themselves and be seen. And these two motives may look similar outwardly, but spiritually, they are completely different foundations. This is why pride is so dangerous. Because pride doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes pride hides inside ambition. Sometimes it hides inside, I just want to succeed. Sometimes it hides inside spiritual language. Sometimes it hides inside good intentions that are not fully purified. But spiritually, God will never entrust lasting elevation to a heart that is controlled by pride, because pride changes the heart without warning. It makes people forget where they came from. It makes people feel superior to others. It makes people stop listening to correction. It makes people believe they are self-made. And the crown becomes dangerous when the soul is immature. This is why some people rise quickly and then suddenly lose themselves. They prayed for success, but they were never prepared for the identity shift that comes with it. Money changes them. Fame changes them. Influence changes them. Recognition changes them. Not because success is evil, but because their inner life was never healed before their outer life expanded. And psychologically, this is a very deep truth. An unhealed person will often use success as a mask for insecurity. They chase applause because silence reminds them of emptiness. They chase status because they feel insignificant inside. They chase validation because they have not learned internal worth. They chase recognition because they do not feel seen within themselves. So success becomes a coping mechanism instead of a calling. But no crown, no matter how big, can heal a broken soul. Because external achievements cannot fix internal wounds. Only God can. Only transformation can. Only healing in the hidden place can restore what success cannot touch. And this is why your spiritual health matters more than your public image. Because a strong platform with a weak soul is dangerous. It looks impressive on the outside, but it is unstable on the inside. A person can have followers but still feel empty, have influence but still feel lost, have success but still feel broken, have recognition but still lack peace. And this is the tragedy many people discover too late. Because nobody talks about the internal cost of external success. Nobody tells you that the higher you rise without healing, the more fragile you can become inside. That is why God is not just preparing your future. He is protecting your soul. He is not only concerned about where you are going, but who you are becoming on the way there. Because spiritually, God is not only examining what you want, He is examining who you are becoming while you wait for it. And this is the part many people fail to understand. Many people ask God, "Why is it taking so long? Why haven't things changed yet? Why does it seem like others are moving ahead while I'm still here?" But the deeper spiritual question is not, when will it happen? The deeper question is, what is God trying to build inside me before it happens? Because spiritually, God is more focused on transformation than performance. Humans are often obsessed with appearance. God is focused on identity. People care about results. God cares about the heart producing those results. People celebrate platforms. God studies character. And this is why some prayers take time, not because God is ignoring you, but because He is working on parts of you that success alone can never fix. Because anyone can look successful, anyone can appear confident, anyone can create an image, anyone can build attention online, anyone can look spiritually mature in public. But not everyone has peace when the room becomes quiet. Not everyone has integrity when temptation appears. Not everyone has spiritual depth when pressure increases. Not everyone has emotional stability when life becomes painful. And spiritually, God sees beyond appearances. He sees the hidden thoughts, the hidden motives, the hidden wounds, the hidden pride, the hidden fears. So while people are busy asking God for opportunities, God is often busy working on their inner condition. Because God is not just trying to bless your hands, He is trying to purify your heart. He is teaching you how to stay humble when recognition comes, how to stay faithful when emotions change, how to stay grounded when life becomes successful, how to stay dependent on Him when doors begin to open. And this is why the craft matters so deeply. Because the craft develops things the crown cannot. The crown may bring visibility, but it cannot create maturity. The crown may attract people, but it cannot build discipline. The crown may increase influence, but it cannot produce inner peace. Only the process can do that. Only hidden seasons can shape that level of depth. And this is why the craft teaches lessons that public success never could. The craft teaches discipline when motivation disappears, patience when answers are delayed, humility when nobody notices your effort, consistency when life feels repetitive, faithfulness when the reward has not yet arrived. And spiritually, these hidden lessons are not small. They are preparing your soul to survive future pressure. Because many people collapse after success because they developed talent, but never developed character. They built platforms, but never built emotional strength. They learned how to perform publicly, but never learned how to endure privately and psychologically. Repeated discipline begins to rewire the mind. Every single day you continue showing up, even when you feel unnoticed, even when nobody applauds you, even when your progress feels invisible. Something powerful is happening inside you. Your mind is learning endurance. Your emotions are learning stability. Your thoughts are learning patience. Your reactions are becoming healthier. Your spirit is becoming stronger. And this transformation often happens so slowly that you do not even notice it at first. But over time, you begin to realize that you no longer react the same way. Things that once broke you now strengthen you. Things that once distracted you now no longer control you. Things that once made you impatient now teach you trust. And this is how hidden seasons quietly mature a person. You are becoming emotionally stable, spiritually grounded, mentally mature, not through comfort, but through consistent process. Because spiritually, God often uses repetition to build strength, the repeated prayer, the repeated obedience, the repeated discipline, the repeated faithfulness. These small hidden actions slowly shape your identity. And psychologically, this is important because the human mind is transformed by repeated behavior. What you repeatedly practice eventually becomes part of who you are. This is why daily obedience matters. Because small, consistent obedience creates strong people. Not dramatic moments, not emotional excitement, not temporary motivation, but steady faithfulness over time. That is how deep roots are formed. And this is why hidden seasons matter so much. Because hidden seasons are not wasted seasons. They are training seasons, construction seasons, purification seasons. God is strengthening your inner life before exposing your outer life. Because if your inner world is weak, external success will expose it. And after, God begins shaping your character in hidden seasons. The next thing many people encounter is pain. Not the kind of pain people post online, but the deep internal pain that changes a person. The pain of waiting, the pain of uncertainty, the pain of feeling forgotten, the pain of praying and not seeing immediate answers, the pain of being misunderstood, the pain of watching others move ahead while your own life feels still. And this is usually the stage where many people begin questioning God, because the process becomes uncomfortable. And spiritually, the process is painful because growth stretches you beyond your old self. Transformation is rarely comfortable because God cannot build a new version of you while you remain attached to old patterns, old mindsets, old habits, and old identities. So sometimes the process feels like breaking because something inside you is being reshaped. And many people misunderstand this season. They assume that pain automatically means God has abandoned them. But spiritually, sometimes God allows discomfort because comfort would keep you weak. Comfort can make people spiritually lazy. Comfort can make people dependent on routine instead of God. Comfort can keep a person shallow. Comfort can prevent growth. So God will sometimes allow seasons that stretch your faith, not to destroy you, but to deepen you. Joseph learned wisdom in prison. Imagine that. The very place that looked like rejection was actually preparation. The prison taught him endurance. It taught him patience. It taught him emotional control. It taught him how to survive disappointment without losing faith. And when the palace finally arrived, Joseph had already become strong enough internally to carry it. David learned dependence in isolation before crowds sang his name. He sat alone in the wilderness before he wore a crown. He fought hidden battles nobody saw. The wilderness trained his worship, it trained his courage, it trained his dependence on God. Moses learned humility in the wilderness. A man who once relied on his own strength had to be emptied before he could lead people with wisdom. Even Jesus learned obedience through suffering. And this is one of the deepest spiritual truths many people struggle to accept. Sometimes suffering becomes part of preparation, not because God enjoys pain, but because pain can produce depth that comfort never could. And many people today are trying to escape the very season that is building them. The moment life becomes difficult, they run. The moment the process feels slow, they quit. The moment discomfort appears, they assume something is wrong. But spiritually, pain is not always punishment. Sometimes pain is training. Sometimes pain is purification. Sometimes pain is redirection. Sometimes pain is the breaking of pride, ego, dependence, distraction, or spiritual immaturity. Because certain lessons can only be learned through pressure. And psychologically, hard seasons expose what is truly inside a person. Pressure reveals character, not comfort. When life becomes difficult, the hidden parts of people begin to surface. Fear surfaces, pride surfaces, anger surfaces, impatience surfaces, unhealed wounds surface. And this is why painful seasons often feel emotionally overwhelming, because the process is not just changing your situation, it is exposing your inner condition. And this exposure is uncomfortable, but it is necessary, because God cannot heal what you continue hiding from. And many people break down emotionally during hard seasons, because they mistake exposure for destruction. But spiritually, exposure is often the first step toward transformation. God allows certain pressures not to shame you, but to reveal what still needs healing. And this is why spiritually mature people begin to view pain differently. They stop asking, "How do I escape this season quickly?" and instead begin asking, "What is this season trying to teach me?" Because spiritually mature people understand something powerful. Growth often feels like breaking before it feels like becoming. A seed must break open before it becomes a tree. Gold must pass through fire before it becomes purified. Muscles must experience resistance before they become stronger. And in the same way, the soul often grows through stretching, pressure, and endurance. And psychologically, this is where resilience is formed. Every painful season you survive changes your capacity. You become stronger emotionally, wiser mentally, deeper spiritually. Not because suffering itself is magical, but because what you choose to become through suffering matters. Some people become bitter through pain. Others become wiser. Some people allow pain to harden them. Others allow pain to humble them and draw them closer to God. And this is why attitude during hardship matters deeply. Because pain can either transform you or consume you. So do not despise the hard season. Do not assume your struggle is meaningless. Do not think your hidden battles are wasted. Because what feels heavy right now may be building spiritual muscles you will need later. What feels slow right now may be protecting you from future collapse. What feels painful right now may be producing the strongest version of you. Because after God begins transforming your inner life in hidden seasons, the process naturally becomes uncomfortable. Why? Because transformation requires pressure, growth requires stretching, healing requires honesty, and maturity requires endurance. So the pain is not proof that God left you. It may actually be proof that God is still shaping you for something greater than your current understanding. Beginnings, the next spiritual revelation becomes even deeper. Your craft is not just work. Your craft can become worship, and this changes everything about how you view your process. Because many people think worship only happens inside church buildings. They think worship is only singing, only preaching, only raising hands during a service, only spiritual activities people can visibly recognize. But spiritually, worship is much deeper than a moment. Worship is a lifestyle of surrender. It is the posture of the heart. It is the way you live when nobody is watching. It is how you honor God in ordinary moments. And this is where many people miss the holiness of consistency. Because spiritually, your discipline can become worship. Every time you choose obedience over distraction, that is worship. Every time you stay faithful in hidden places, that is worship. Every time you continue building even when progress feels slow, that is worship. Your consistency can become worship. The quiet mornings nobody sees, the repeated effort, the daily discipline, the private prayers, the unseen sacrifices. Heaven notices all of it. And this connects perfectly with the previous section about small beginnings. Because many people think small actions are insignificant. But spiritually, small faithful actions repeated consistently become sacred before God. When you keep showing up faithfully, even when nobody notices, heaven notices. When people overlook your effort, God still sees your obedience. When the world ignores your consistency, heaven still records your faithfulness. And this is important because many people only stay committed when they are being celebrated. But true spiritual maturity continues even without applause, because worship is not performance for people. It is devotion toward God. And spiritually, some of the purest worship happens in hidden places where no audience exists. When you refuse corruption in a dishonest world, that is worship. When everybody around you chooses compromise, but you choose integrity, that is worship. When you stay pure in a polluted generation, that is worship. When temptation appears, but you still choose obedience, that is worship. When bitterness tries to enter your heart, but you still choose forgiveness, that is worship. When life becomes painful, but you still trust God, that is worship. And perhaps one of the deepest forms of worship is this: when you keep praying through pain, not because everything feels good, but because your faith remains alive even in difficulty. That kind of worship carries depth, because it is easy to praise God during comfort. But worship becomes powerful when it survives suffering. And psychologically, this kind of consistency strengthens identity, because repeated obedience slowly shapes how a person sees themselves. You stop living only for external validation. You stop depending entirely on people's approval to remain motivated. Instead, your actions become rooted in purpose and conviction, and this creates emotional stability. Because people who only work for applause often collapse when recognition disappears. But people who work from purpose remain steady even in silence. And spiritually. This is why respecting your craft matters so much. Respecting your craft means honoring the assignment God gave you, even if it feels small, even if it feels repetitive, even if it feels unnoticed, even if nobody understands your process yet. Because, spiritually, faithfulness in hidden places is never wasted. God sees the unseen effort, the private discipline, the tears nobody knows about, the prayers whispered in exhaustion, the moments you wanted to quit but kept going anyway. And this is where many people misunderstand success. They think greatness is built only in public moments. But spiritually, greatness is usually built quietly, in hidden obedience, hidden consistency, hidden surrender, long before the world sees the fruit. David worshipped in fields before leading a kingdom. Joseph remained faithful in prison before entering the palace. Noah kept building before rain ever appeared. Jesus remained obedient before public glory arrived, and all of them understood something powerful. Faithfulness to God matters more than immediate recognition from people. Because spiritually, God rewards faithfulness before fame, not performance, not popularity, not noise. Faithfulness. Faithfulness when nobody claps. Faithfulness when progress is slow. Faithfulness when life feels uncertain. Faithfulness when the process becomes exhausting. And this is why your craft is sacred. Because your process is not merely about success. It is about devotion, the way you work, the way you pray, the way you remain disciplined, the way you stay obedient through difficulty. All of it can become an offering before God. And after everything we've walked through in this message, the hidden seasons, the painful process, the danger of comparison, the testing of motives, the small beginnings, the quiet acts of worship, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. God was never just preparing a crown for you. He was preparing you for the crown. And this is why the process matters so deeply. Because many people want the reward, without realizing the reward carries weight. Responsibility has weight. Influence has weight. Leadership has weight. Purpose has weight. And if a person is not spiritually prepared, the very thing they prayed for can eventually crush them. So before you ask God for the crown, ask Him to strengthen your character. Ask Him to heal your pride, correct your motives, deepen your wisdom, stabilize your emotions, strengthen your discipline, purify your heart. Because character is what keeps a person standing after success arrives. Before you pray for influence, pray for wisdom. Because influence without wisdom becomes dangerous. A person with influence can either heal people or damage them, can either inspire people or manipulate them, can either glorify God or glorify themselves. And this is why wisdom matters more than visibility. Because wisdom teaches you how to carry success without losing your soul. Before you chase visibility, chase depth. Because deep roots survive strong storms, and spiritually, many people look strong publicly while collapsing privately. They have platforms, but no peace, attention, but no healing, success, but no spiritual stability. And this is why God spends so much time working on hidden places. Because crowns without character become burdens. Success without God becomes emptiness, and elevation without preparation becomes destruction. Some people think the blessing is the platform, but spiritually, the real blessing is becoming the kind of person who can carry the platform without being destroyed by it. That is why you must respect the hidden season. Respect the slow season. Respect the uncomfortable season. Respect the lonely season. Respect the process that is shaping your mind, your spirit, your character, and your heart. Because nothing God uses is ever wasted. Not the tears, not the waiting, not the disappointment, not the pressure, Not the hidden battles nobody knows about. Every painful moment carried a lesson. Every delayed season carried development. Every hidden struggle carried preparation. And one day, the same process you once hated will become the reason you are emotionally strong enough to endure pressure, spiritually mature enough to handle influence, mentally stable enough to survive responsibility, humble enough to remain grounded after elevation arrives. One day you will look back and realize the waiting was not punishment. The hidden season was not rejection. The process was preparation all along. And when that day finally comes, you will not just look successful. You will not just appear powerful. You will not just impress people externally. You will be spiritually ready, ready to carry purpose without pride, ready to handle influence without corruption, ready to walk through success without losing intimacy with God, ready to remain faithful even after elevation. Because spiritually, the greatest success is not gaining a crown, it is gaining a transformed soul while carrying it. So if this message spoke to your spirit, take a moment and reflect honestly. What season are you in right now? Preparation. Where God is building you quietly? Pressure. Where life feels painful and stretching? Or promotion? Where responsibility and opportunity are increasing? And whichever season you are in, do not waste it. Because every season carries a purpose. The hidden season teaches depth. The painful season teaches endurance. The waiting season teaches trust. The promotion season tests humility. And through all of it, God is forming something greater inside you. So leave your thoughts in the comments. Share the part of this message that touched you the most. And if you are currently in a difficult season, remember this deeply. God is not ignoring you. He is shaping you. He is preparing your character before your crown, your depth before your elevation, your spirit before your success. So do not rush the process. Do not compare your journey. Do not despise small beginnings, and do not abandon the craft because it feels slow. Because one day, you will understand why God took His time with you. Respect the craft before you expect the crown.